Hello and welcome back to some more Into the Emerald Dream star rating videos. Today we have Hunter, Mage and Paladin to get through. So let's start off alphabetically with the Hunter. They have an imbue package, which I think is meant to consist of Exotic Houndmaster, Umbra Claw as your imbuers, Verdant Dreamsaber, Mythical Runebear, and Gauldron as sort of the payoffs for getting these Gigabuffed beasts. If you remember, the imbue button for Hunter is reduce the cost of a beast by 1 and improve its attack by 1. And that scales for every imbuement you have. I think this imbue package is going to be a bit underwhelming. I think it's actually kind of unfortunate that Hunter has an imbue mechanic in it. It makes sense, like, thematically for the lore of the classes that got the imbue powers to have the imbue one. But Hunter, in like the not too distant past, aka 3 expansions in a row now, has got a way of changing their button. They have the Discover Hunter button, they have Kerrigan from the Zerg Hunter, and now they have this imbue mechanic. And obviously, you only have one button, so you sort of have to pick a lane and stay in it. And honestly, I think the imbue button for Hunter is probably going to end up being worse than the Discover Hunter that you can get from Niall. So because of that, I don't actually think this is going to be a particularly strong deck. I will also say, I think before the nerfs to the Zerg minions that happened or is going to happen actually in a few days' time, I'm actually not sure this would have got in over a Zerg Hunter as well. I think because of the nerfs to the Zerg Hunter deck, the hand buff variant of that deck won't be as strong anymore, and therefore I actually think this will probably be a bit better than Zerg Hunter once all the dust settles. I think there's clearly an intention as well that your beasts you need to put into this deck are actually quite defined. You don't really want to fill your deck with beasts that don't like contribute towards some sort of big win condition. And in my eyes, I think a big one of those is going to be King Plush. You really would like to get King Plush hit with this, because increasing its attack is like demonstrably extremely powerful. You could clear the board up with a King Plush and then use Gauldron to double the effect of what you've got on the plush with Gauldron. I do think you'll have some other beasts in there as well to, like, you know, make the deck actually hum. But the more beasts you put into the deck, the less likely your button press is going to hit the beast you want. So I think for those reasons, you're going to have to be quite specific with the beasts you put in there. And also because of the whole thing behind it, that again, unlike the Druid one where you can sort of imbue by doing other stuff that's actually tangibly useful, you have to play some of these imbue cards. And they're not bad actually in the Hunter package. I think they're okay. But you know, there are better cards in the game of Hearthstone. And then also, as I said before, I think the meta, if it goes into a really, really greedy state, you can't really beat the Hunter button for greed, right? And by the Hunter button, I actually mean Niall's button for greed. The Discover Hunter button is so, so powerful for just generating copies of cards. So for those reasons, I actually think this is only going to be a tier 3 deck. And I've given 3 stars to all these cards, except for the Verdant Dreamsaber, which I'm actually only going to give 2 stars to. I'm not sure this will make the list. I understand the benefit of it in terms of the imbue mechanic, but as I said, you need to be very specific with the beast you put in the deck. You already have to put Umbra Claw in the deck, which I think you really don't want to get hit with the button press. I think Mythical Runebear is actually a big enough pull to play this mechanic. I think copying this with any form of stat on it is pretty good. Verdant Dreamsaber, though, I think is a little bit undervalued compared to some of the other things you could put into your deck instead. So I think for those reasons, you're not going to fill your deck with just like complete beasts. I think you have a pretty nice mix between, you know, a couple of very important beasts and then just a couple of good minions in general, that this might actually not make the cut. Then the other package I think Hunter is meant to have is some sort of spell package with Brawl Bear Mantle, Grace of the Great Wolf, Spirit Bond, and Amphibian Spirit. And I think more specifically for the Amphibian Spirit and the Spirit Bond, and maybe the Grace of the Great Wolf as well, it's supposed to be like a spell token type deck, which actually Hunter has had in the recent history. Unfortunately, a lot of those cards are rotating out right now, and also the spell token Hunter deck wasn't particularly strong anyway. So for those reasons, I think Spirit Bond and Amphibian Spirit I'm going to give 2 stars to. Grace of the Great Wolf actually might not have seen playing Classic. I'm giving it 1 star, it's a horrible card. Brawl, though, despite all of this, I've given 4 stars to Brawl. I think there is a world where Discover Hunter might have an archetype that puts Brawl in the deck. If you think about it, in the Discover Hunter deck, they have some spells that can get reduced down to 0 cost via Brawl. If you could also get copies of those spells, or just, you know, if you can generate discovered spells that are cheap, which you can in that deck, there is a conceivable win condition where you play Brawl, maybe you play a bunch of the Grifter amulets, you play a bunch of your 0 cost summon some guys, and you just go for like 2 or 3 Huffers and try and push a bit more damage out through that means. And I think that's actually a pretty spooky turn, so I can see a world where Brawl makes the cut. I can also really see a world where he doesn't make the cut, so I have kind of put a star on him, just because I think that in the future, if there's any spell package printed for Hunter, this card will go into that deck. And I think it's a really good card. It's just, currently I don't think the full deck package quite exists for him. But I've decided to cover my bases and, go into the 4-star department. Finally, there is Shepherd's Crook, which I don't think we'll see play in any deck. I was trying to, and ah over, how much do I value a dormant 3/3 sheep. I think by the time, just think of it this way. If you play it on 3, you attack on 3, you don't get the 3/3 sheep till 5, by which point a lot of decks can actually deal with that type of tempo. So I think it's just too slow for Hunter. Then we go into Mage Land. Mage Land, I really should have put the imbue buttons on these slides. Apologies that I didn't, but they've also got an imbue package. Their imbue package is get a summon a 1-mana wisp, summon 1 wisp, which is a 0-mana card, and you deal 1 damage randomly. And both of those scale up as you imbue. So you get more wisps, you get more damage. I think this package is going to be reasonably strong. You do, unlike some of the other buttons, get value up front, because you at least are getting the 1/1 stat line on the board, which actually, when you really think about it, the imbue button for the first press on Mage is actually just the Paladin button plus. You get the 1/1 plus 1 damage randomly. It's not a huge buff on the Paladin button, but it's not completely crazy. Unlike some of the other ones where it's push this at your own caution, because you're probably not going to get value from this. I think the cards for the imbues are okay as well. I think the Spirit Gatherer basically is a 2-mana 2/3, right? If you put the Wisp on the board, you're getting that stat line. Reasonable, and there are maybe reasons to keep a 0-cost card in your hand. Wisp Rider, I think, is again quite reasonable as well when you bear in mind that the imbue is going to give you some stat lines on top of the Wisp Rider. So yeah, I think this is okay. Divination, Destroy Guy, draw 3 cards, that is Eat the Imp, that is seen playing some decks, and Wisps are going to be on the board almost at all times, so it's almost 2 mana to draw 3 cards, which is fine. Now I think Star Search has a reason to exist. I think you could pump this thing up quite quickly to do a lot of damage to a minion. It's basically 3 mana remove a guy in Mage, and actually Mage is kind of lacking that right now, so again, all things pointing towards pretty goodness in Mage. And then finally a Sinner. I don't know exactly how long it'll take to get this thing up, but I suspect you could get it up around 10 to 11 on turns. And it's a lot of damage. You can play around it a little bit by just summoning a big board yourself, but it's okay, I'll say. When I did the reveals for this, I couldn't help but think that the Protoss Mage deck was going to be better than this one, and that deck wasn't seeing a lot of play. Now that we know the nerfs and stuff that are happening, we do know that the Protosses aren't being touched that much, so perhaps there is a world where Protoss Mage actually improves in quality and pushes this down. I can also see a world, and I've not really put together the list yet, where perhaps a bit of the Protoss package meets a bit of this package, and maybe you use the Colossuses with the Asinas, and you go for some big damage that way. So Mage is going to be interesting. Watch this space, basically. I can see this being quite a fun mechanic, and actually I can see a world where it's pretty strong. And even if you can't get Ascender up that quickly, as long as you're imbuing your button relatively quickly, the chip damage is going to add up eventually, and hopefully that will take you to the promised lands. And then also, in the not too distant past, Mage has been pretty strong. I will say they've had some, really horrible nerfs in, some of the last patches, so they were actually sitting pretty poorly on Hearthstone replay right now. But I don't think they're completely, cut adrift. Anyway, I've given all of these 4 stars. I think I'm being a bit generous. I think it's more likely to be a tier 3 deck, but it'll be on that boundary between tier 2 and tier 3, this Wisp deck. Part of the reason that I pushed up is because it actually gives you a tangible value immediately. You are getting stats when you push the button, and that is pretty reasonable, honestly, if you ask me. Merry Moonkin actually don't think will make this list, or at least it'll see some testing but won't get to the final cut. I think this card's a little bit weak compared to the other ones. It doesn't really progress the Asina quest line, it doesn't really progress the Star Search quest line, that type of thing. And actually, just if you wanted to survive a bit longer, I couldn't help but think the miniature card, I forgot what it's called now, that Elemental, maybe it's just better than Merry Moonkin. It's at least less specific. Costs 1 more mana, but you get 2 bites of the cherry. And, as I said, you can just put it onto the board to save you when, you're really back up against the wall versus a big guy. And give you a little bit of turn to imbue the button longer and deal some more damage. So, I'm not sure Merry Moonkin will make the list. Then there's 4 random cards. Forbidden Shrine, Spark of Life, Stellar Balance, and Quanzu. Quanzu, I think, is disgusting in the form of it shouldn't be a legendary minion. The effect is so flaccid, it's crazy. So, I think from a design perspective, 0 stars on Quanzu. But in actual star rating terms, it's 3 mana 3/4 discover a card. Is that good enough for standard? Probably not for Mage, so I don't think this will see any play. Nor do I think Spark of Life or Forbidden Shrine will see any play, so I've given all of those cards 1 star. They're a bit just too vanilla-ish, honestly. Even for like the weakened set, I still think there are better options in Mage. Stellar Balance, on the other hand, I've actually given 2 stars to. There is a world... Firstly, it's a 0 mana spell in Mage, and maybe they can do something with 0 mana spells that are a bit unfair. The Moonfire is the 0 mana part, by the way, in case you're wondering. Also, I can see a world where Stellar Balance goes into Draenei Mage, and actually maybe Spark of Life makes the Draenei Mage list as well. And that is somewhere around the tier 3 or tier 4 deck, so perhaps both of these, like, maybe being a bit mean to Spark of Life, but I can see some worlds where Stellar Balance sees a bit of play. And then finally, there is a potential world where you try and do this cards from other class, Mage, Rogue package, Casino-esque style, and Stellar Balance generates 2 cards from other classes for you, so it may see some testing, but I don't think it'll really push the boundaries of the meta. And in Forbidden Shrine, I think it's just too random. Like, there are some points, as we mentioned. I think 9 cost was one of the points where there's only like 2 options you can get, so it's 50-50. But like, one of the options is not great for 9 mana, so play at your own risk. It's a bit of a casino, right? If you enjoy casinos, then you might just put this card into your deck as like a 29th, 30th card and just shoot for the moon. Finally, we have Paladin, and Paladin is another one of the Imbue classes, so let's deal with their Imbue package first. Their Imbue package is shuffle 2 portals into your deck that summon 1-cost dragons, and the cost of the dragon goes up as you imbue. This is the package that honestly nearly pulled me back into the game. I was like, oh, I feel like I need a break from Hearthstone, and I saw this and I was like, you know what, this is really right up my alley. One of my favourite decks from the past was mid-range Paladin, and I kind of see this as like a mid-range-ish Paladin deck. Paladin doesn't quite have the control cards that like Death Knights do, or that Warlocks do, or that Priests do, so they don't want to go into the super late game. But if you can generate a couple of portals and tutor for them, and there's a few cards that let you tutor for them, Dream Warden I think is a super card. One of the stronger cards of the set, honestly. And if you can tutor for them, you could easily get some early dragons up quickly and generate a pretty spooky board of dragons. There's also that dream always of generating a dragon from the portal, which is the Gold Petal Drake itself, which imbues itself further. And I think that's going to be such an incredible high roll if you can ever pull that off. But yeah, generally speaking, I think this package is going to be pretty strong. Now, the problem with this deck being ever tier 1 is I think it can't be because Steam Cleaner is getting added back to the core set, and if this deck ever was, like, preposterously strong, everyone would run Steam Cleaner. I think it would just basically kill this list. So for those reasons, I've actually given it 4 stars. I think, again, I'm being generous. I think it's on the border of 2 to 3. It has got this risk of, you know, your button is 2 mana do nothing. If all of your portals go on the bottom of your deck, you might not ever get there. But I think because of the tutoring with Dream Warden, with Dragon Scale Armament, which, by the way, is basically 1 mana draw 2 cards, I think you're generally speaking going to be unbelievably unlucky to not be able to get any portals up before, you know, you get into your mid-game. So, yeah, I think it's actually a pretty strong package. The next package, which actually I think will go in with this package as well, is this Ursol package, where it's cast a big spell as an aura package for 3 turns. And again, I love this card. I think it's such a fun mechanic. Currently, Paladin doesn't have many great ways of abusing it. Renewing Flame is actually a pretty strong way of doing it, though. How are you going to kill the Paladin who's healing for 10 health per turn? It's going to be really fucking hard, and during that time you can imbue your button and put more portals into the deck and try and get more dragons, get bigger dragons. Really cool. And then Ursine Maul is 4 mana 4/2 weapon, draw 2 cards, and tutor to this Ursol Renewing Flames package, potentially, if you don't put any other big cards in the deck. Or you do. Maybe you put Ceaseless Expanse in the deck, maybe you do go a bit more control heavy. I really like this, and again, I think it'll go into the same package, so I've given 4 stars to them. But there is a world where you could potentially run this without the Imbue package as some sort of other control or mid-range Paladin list. Finally, we have 3 random cards again. Mark of Ursol, which, you know, has got the name of Ursol, but doesn't really fit the bill of what Ursol is doing. Toreth and Lightmender. Toreth, I have no reason why it's been printed in this set. There's, like, no Divine Shield package. I guess Lightmender's got Divine Shield on it, but, again, itself is a pretty vanilla-esque minion. And a Mark of Ursol, we've seen cards which are 2 mana, set an enemy minion stat line to 1/1, and they not see play in Paladin, so I don't think the meta has moved enough for it to suddenly see play. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it sees a bit of testing. So I've done 1-star to all these cards. I don't think they'll make a list. One other thing I'll actually mention on Ursol, I can see a world where the Ursol and actually the Imbue deck running mainly minions and not too many spells. Because actually, I think Ursol hitting Aegis or Dragon Scale Armaments would actually be a pretty reasonable role. And I think part of the reason why this says highest cost spell rather than random is actually hitting Dragon Scale Armaments if you imbue enough times. It's actually a pretty big draw, right? It could just be another dragon at the end of your turn being summoned, so I can see a world with that Ursol package in case you're wondering what I would also add into it. I think you'll use 2 copies of Renewing Flames. I think you'll have Yggdrasil somewhere in your deck as well. And then possibly that is it for your big spells, and then you'll just try and hit Dragon Scale Armaments, Aegis of Light, and then fill the package out with a few dragons. That seems reasonable to me. Okay, I just remembered, that is it for this episode. I'm ready to go to another class, because, man, I'm actually really digging this aesthetic, so I hope everyone else enjoys this aesthetic when it comes out in just over a week's time. Anyway, if you enjoyed this one, leave a like, comment, subscribe, everything helps me out, and I'll see you next time. Bye!